My aunt burst into a private hospice meeting and froze at the sight of a thick sign-in binder on the table. For weeks, my family had been telling everyone I abandoned my dying grandmother until I stopped arguing and started looking for something they couldn't rewrite. A record. My name is Ethan. I'm 38 years old and I live outside Raleigh, North Carolina. I work as a systems analyst for a mid-sized hospital network, which means most of my days are quiet, predictable, and full of things that either work or don't. I've always liked that kind of life. I'm not the loud one in my family. I'm not the one who turns every dinner into a performance or every argument into a courtroom scene. I'm the one who shows up, fixes what needs fixing, pays what needs paying, and tries not to make a mess. And for most of my adult life, that worked fine, until my grandmother ended up in hospice, and my family decided it would be useful to turn her final weeks into a morality play where I was the villain. Not because I did something horrible, but because I was the easiest person to blame. My grandma's name was Margaret, but almost no one called her that. She was Nana to the grandkids, Mom to her children, Mrs. Sullivan to every neighbor who ever borrowed sugar and never returned it. She was the kind of woman who stayed composed even when she was angry, which somehow made her scarier than anyone who yelled. She had a steady hand, a steady gaze, and a way of making you feel like you should do the right thing without her ever having to ask twice. She also had a long memory. That mattered because my family has a long history of selective remembering. My mom Elaine is the oldest of 3. My uncle Rick is the middle child, and my aunt Denise is the youngest. If you ask them, they'd tell you they were a tight-knit family who always rallied together. If you asked me, I'd tell you they were professionals at keeping up appearances. My mom cared deeply about what people thought, not in a shallow social media way, more like a constant quiet pressure. The right church clothes, the right neighbors, the right story told the right way to the right people. If something happened in our family that could make us look messy, she didn't ask, "What's true?" She asked, "What are people going to say?" My aunt Denise was similar, just sharper around the edges. She liked to play the role of the devoted daughter, the one who handled everything. If a crisis happened, Denise wanted credit for being the rescuer. She also wanted control, and those two wants usually traveled together. Uncle Rick was Rick, a good-time guy with a history of showing up late and leaving early. He'd pat people on the back, make a joke, promise he'd help, then disappear. But if there was an audience, if there was praise to be earned, Rick had a way of materializing in the frame. I grew up watching all of that, and I learned early that peace in our family didn't come from honesty. It came from everyone agreeing to the same script. The problem was, Nana didn't operate like that. When I was a kid, Nana was the one who noticed if I was quiet at the dinner table. She was the one who remembered what I liked, the one who didn't treat me like I was a prop in someone else's story. When I was 19 and my parents went through one of their rough patches, Nana was the one who called me and said calmly, "Come here for the weekend. I made stew. We'll talk if you want. We won't if you don't." When I was 26 and my job fell apart during a company merger, Nana slipped a check into an envelope and said, "Don't be proud with me. Be responsible. Cash it and breathe." I paid her back. She never asked. She never even brought it up again. So when she started declining, I noticed before the rest of them admitted it. It began with small things. Forgetting an ingredient, repeating a question, losing weight. Then the falls started. Nothing dramatic at first, but enough to make the air in the room change. The kind of falls that make you realize you're not dealing with getting older anymore. You're dealing with the last chapter. My family responded the way they always did, with denial, delay, and arguments about logistics. For a while, Nana was still at home, with a home health aide coming in a few days a week. My aunt Denise insisted she had it under control. She lived closest, she said. She had the flexible schedule, she said. She was the one handling paperwork, she said. But what that usually meant was Denise decided everything, then told everyone else what had been decided and expected applause. I didn't fight her on it at first. I didn't want to. Nana was still alert enough to have opinions, and she didn't want a family war around her. She wanted calm. She wanted dignity. So I stayed in my lane. I visited when I could. I fixed things around the house. I quietly covered costs that Denise forgot to pay, and I made sure Nana knew she wasn't alone. Then came the hospital stay that changed everything. It was late fall, and I got a call at work from Denise. Her voice had that thin, breathy drama she used when she wanted everyone to feel guilty before they even knew what happened. "It's Mom," she said. "She's not doing good. They're running tests. You should come." I left work, drove straight to the hospital, and found Nana in a room that smelled like disinfectant and warm plastic. She looked small in the bed, her face paler than I'd ever seen it, but her eyes still tracked me when I walked in. I took her hand and tried to keep my voice steady. "Hey, Nana, I'm here." She squeezed once, like she was reminding me she was still herself. My mom arrived later with Rick. Denise arrived last, even though she lived the closest, and she acted like she'd been there for days. She asked for an update in a loud voice, as if the nurses were a panel of experts waiting to present to her. The doctor explained what I'd already suspected. Nana's condition was advancing. They could treat symptoms, keep her comfortable, but the trajectory was clear. The word hospice came up carefully, like it was a fragile object no one wanted to touch. Denise immediately went into performance mode. "Oh my God," she said, hand to chest. "I can't believe this. We're going to take care of you, Mom. We're going to be here every day." My mom sniffed and wiped her eyes. Rick stared at the floor, quiet for once. I didn't say much. I was listening, watching Nana's face, because Nana didn't look comforted. She looked tired. When the doctor left and the room settled, Nana glanced at me and said softly, "Ethan, can you stay a minute?" Denise started to protest, but Nana lifted a hand, and Denise stopped. That was Nana's power. She could shut down the theatrics without raising her voice. After everyone filed out, Nana looked at me and said, "They're going to make this about them." It was so blunt I almost laughed, except nothing about it was funny. I swallowed. "I know." She squeezed my hand again. "You don't play that game. Don't start now." "I won't," I promised, and I meant it. The decision was made within a week. Nana was moved into a hospice facility, clean, quiet, with staff who spoke gently and didn't rush. The kind of place that tries to make dying less frightening for the person doing it, not for the people watching. My mom and Denise talked a lot about the plan. Rick posted vague Facebook statuses about family being everything. Denise made sure to tell anyone who would listen that she was basically living at hospice. And then slowly the truth of what people actually did began to separate from what they said. I went to see Nana after work most evenings. Not every single day. My job had deadlines, and I'm not a person with unlimited time off, but enough that the staff started recognizing me. I learned the rhythm of the place, the shift change, the soft dinner carts, the way the hallway lights dimmed in the evening. Nana wasn't always awake, but when she was, I'd sit by her bed and talk about normal things. I'd read to her sometimes. She liked old mystery novels, the ones with slow, careful plots. Sometimes she'd just want silence, and I'd sit there anyway, because presence mattered more than conversation. Denise came too sometimes, usually in the late morning, when it was convenient, and often with a kind of energy that felt like she was entering a stage. She'd bring a bouquet that was too large, take pictures of Nana's hand in hers, and whisper loudly about how much she loved her. Then she'd leave within 40 minutes. My mom came less than Denise, but more than Rick. She struggled with the reality of it, and I understood that in a way. She'd stand by the bed, cry, say she couldn't handle seeing her mother like that. Nana would comfort her, which seemed backwards to me. Then Mom would leave and call 3 relatives to tell them how devastated she was. Rick, honestly, I didn't see Rick there much at all. I'd hear about how he stopped by, how he spent time with her, but I'd rarely cross paths with him. Still, I wasn't keeping score. Not then, because I thought we were all just trying in our flawed ways to get through something hard. That was my mistake, assuming grief would make my family kinder. It didn't. It made them strategic. The accusation started about 2 weeks after Nana passed. She died quietly, early in the morning. I'd been there the night before, sitting with her while she slept. I left around 10 p.m. because the nurse told me, gently, that Nana seemed comfortable and stable. I went home, showered, and fell asleep with my phone on my chest. The call came at 5:12 a.m. By the time I got there, it was done. Nana was gone. The room was still. The nurse spoke softly. Denise was already there, crying loudly, as if volume could rewind time. My mom arrived later and collapsed into a chair. Rick was nowhere. The funeral was tense in that quiet, polished way our family does. People said she's in a better place, and Denise played the lead mourner. My mom accepted condolences like a public figure. Rick finally showed up, looking solemn, and told everyone Nana meant the world to him. I kept my head down. I shook hands. I thanked people for coming. Then after the funeral, something shifted. I started hearing through friends and extended family that there was a story going around about me. Not a vague one, a specific one. That I had abandoned Nana in hospice. That I couldn't be bothered to visit. That I'd left everything to Denise. That Nana had been heartbroken because I never showed. At first I thought it was a misunderstanding, someone confusing me with Rick, or assuming because I wasn't loud about my visits that I wasn't there. I don't post pictures of dying relatives. I don't announce my good deeds. But then I got a text from a cousin I barely talked to. I heard you didn't go see Nana at the end. That doesn't sound like you. What happened? My stomach dropped, because that wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a narrative, and narratives don't spread that cleanly unless someone is telling them on purpose. I confronted my mom first. I did it carefully, privately, over the phone. "Mom," I said, "people are saying I abandoned Nana. Where is that coming from?" There was a pause, and then her voice went sharp. "Well, Ethan, you weren't there as much as Denise. That's just a fact." Denise was exhausted. She carried the load. "I was there," I said, trying to keep my tone level. "I was there constantly." "You have your own life," she replied, like that was an accusation. "You have work. You weren't present the way a grandson should be." I felt my jaw tighten. "So you're telling people I didn't visit?" "I'm telling people the truth," she said. "And the truth is Denise was the one who showed up." That was the first time I understood what was happening. They weren't grieving Nana. They were using Nana. Because if I was the grandson who abandoned her, then Denise became the saint. My mom became the tragic daughter. Rick somehow escaped notice entirely, because the target was already chosen. And the worst part was how quickly it worked. In our community, reputation is a currency. People spend it like it's nothing, then act shocked when the bill comes due. I started feeling it in little ways. The hesitation in people's voices, the polite distance, the new tone of disappointment when someone said my name. I'd walk into church and feel eyes shift. I'd run into an old neighbor at the grocery store and get that tight smile that says, "I'm being nice because I'm decent, not because I respect you." I even heard from a friend of mine, someone I'd known since high school, that his wife said she could never imagine doing what I did. What I did. Like it was settled. Like I'd been convicted without trial. I didn't explode. I didn't post a rant. I didn't go to Denise's house and scream on her porch. I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I started pulling the thread. Because here's what I've learned from working in healthcare systems. Records exist. People document things. Not always perfectly, not always fairly, but enough that reality leaves fingerprints. And hospice, especially, runs on documentation, medication logs, care notes, shift handoffs, and yes, visits, who came in, when, how long they stayed, who signed their name and who didn't. At the time, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't thinking about exposing anyone. I was thinking about my grandmother's dignity. Because even after she was gone, they were turning her final days into a prop for their image management. And they were doing it by dragging my name through the dirt. So I made a decision, quietly, the way I make most decisions that actually matter. I was going to find out exactly what happened during those weeks. Not the version my family performed, the version that could be proven. And once I had that, I was done letting them tell my story for me. I started with the only advantage I had. I wasn't emotional about paperwork. I wasn't trying to win a family argument. I was trying to correct a false record that was spreading through my life like smoke. And smoke only clears when you open windows. The first window was simple, my own memory. I sat at my kitchen table that Sunday morning with a legal pad and wrote down every visit I could remember. Not just the day, the time I arrived, the time I left, who I spoke to, what Nana was like, awake, asleep, restless, lucid. I remembered details the way my brain always does when I'm stressed. The pattern on the hospice curtains, the name tag on a nurse, the smell of coffee near the front desk. By the time I finished, I had a list that looked almost ridiculous. It wasn't an everyday, all-day list. It was a real person list, a man who worked full-time and still showed up. Then I checked my phone. I pulled up my location history. My map app showed my trips to the facility. I scrolled through my calendar. Nana visit, hospice, bring charger, talk to nurse meds. I found receipts too. Gas station receipts near the hospice on weeknights. A debit card purchase from the vending machine in the lobby at 8:41 p.m. None of it was the kind of evidence you'd present in court, but it formed a pattern, a trail. And the trail didn't match the story being told about me. I thought, for one naive moment, that if I showed this to my mom and Denise, it would stop. That they'd realize they'd gone too far, or that they'd gotten bad info, or that their grief had made them careless. So I tried. I asked my mom to meet me for coffee. Neutral territory. Public enough for her to behave, private enough to talk. She arrived wearing her church face, a careful expression that looked sympathetic to strangers and cold to family. She sat down, adjusted her purse and said, "I don't know why you're making this harder than it already is." That was her opening line. I slid my phone across the table and showed her the list. My notes, the location history, the receipts. "I didn't abandon her," I said, keeping my voice even. "I was there, regularly, consistently." My mom barely looked. She glanced at the screen like it was something embarrassing. "Ethan," she said, "I'm not doing this." "Doing what?" This accounting. Like it's a competition." "It's not a competition," I said. "It's my reputation. People are calling me heartless." She sipped her coffee and avoided my eyes. "People talk. They're talking because someone is telling them something." Her mouth tightened. "Denise is grieving. She did everything." That phrase again. She did everything. The way people say everything when they mean the parts that were visible. I leaned in slightly. "Mom, are you telling people I didn't visit?" She sighed like I was a difficult coworker. "I'm telling them Denise was there constantly, and you—" "That's not what they're saying," I replied. "They're saying I abandoned Nana. They're saying she died alone." My mom finally looked at me then, and the look wasn't grief. It was warning. "Maybe," she said, "if you had been more present, no one would be able to say that." It was so unfair it almost took my breath. Because it wasn't about what happened. It was about what could be said, about what sounded believable. I sat back, felt my hands go cold around my cup. "So you're not going to correct it?" My mom's voice softened into something that sounded like concern but wasn't. "Ethan, just let it go. Families say things. It'll pass." It won't pass, I thought. Not if they keep feeding it. I left that coffee shop knowing two things. 1, my mother wasn't going to help. 2, I was dealing with something more intentional than gossip. Over the next week, the smear didn't fade. It got bolder. My Aunt Denise began mentioning hospice in almost every conversation, like she couldn't go 10 minutes without reminding people she'd lived through that trauma. She posted a long, sentimental message online about being the only one there when it mattered. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. People in our circle knew who she meant, and they loved the drama of filling in blanks. Then a woman from my mom's church, someone who used to hug me at holidays, messaged me. "I hope you've made peace with your choices," she wrote. "Your Nana deserved better." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something hard form in my chest. It wasn't just hurt. It was anger, clean and sharp, because Nana did deserve better. And so did the truth. I decided to stop arguing with people who were invested in misunderstanding me, and start speaking to people who might actually know what happened. The hospice facility had rules, of course. Privacy, records. I wasn't next of kin, my mom was. Denise inserted herself as the primary contact as soon as Nana was admitted, because that was how Denise operated. She took roles the way some people take seats on a bus. But there was still one thing I could do. I could ask. Not for medical records. Not for confidential notes. Just for guidance. So I went back to the facility on a Tuesday afternoon and asked to speak to someone in administration. The lobby looked the same as it always had. Soft lighting, neutral walls, a table with pamphlets that said things like grief support and caregiver resources. It had always felt like a quiet place to me, almost sacred. Now it felt like a place where my family had staged a play. A receptionist with kind eyes asked, "Can I help you?" "My grandmother was a patient here," I said. "Margaret Sullivan. She passed a few weeks ago." Her face softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I replied. "I'm her grandson. I was here often during her stay. I have a question about visitation procedures. Is there someone I can speak to?" She hesitated, but not unkindly. "Are you listed as a contact?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "My aunt handled most of that." She nodded like she'd heard that story 1,000 times. "Let me see if our nurse manager is available." A few minutes later, a woman in navy scrubs came out. She was in her late 40s, hair pulled back, posture upright like someone who'd spent years in rooms full of fear and grief, and had learned how to carry both without collapsing. "I'm Karen," she said. "Nurse manager." "You're Ethan?" I blinked. "Yes. How did you?" She smiled faintly. "I remember you. You were here evenings. You always asked before you moved anything in the room." That single sentence, simple, factual, hit me harder than I expected, because it meant I wasn't invisible. In my family's story, I was absent. In this building's reality, I was remembered. "I don't want to cause trouble," I said quickly, "because old habits die hard. I'm dealing with a situation where people are claiming I wasn't here, that I didn't visit, and I stopped myself before my voice could crack. It's damaging. Karen's expression didn't change much, but her eyes sharpened like she was focusing. I can't discuss patient care details, she said carefully, but I can explain our general policies. I understand, I said. She gestured toward a small sitting area off the lobby and we sat. Karen folded her hands and said, "We have a visitor protocol for every patient. People sign in at the front desk when they arrive, especially after hours. Some visitors don't, because they're family and they think they don't have to. But staff are trained to remind them. It's for safety and for tracking who is in the building." Tracking. That word sat there between us. I kept my face neutral. "So there is a record of visitors?" "There is a sign-in process," she said, still cautious, "but access to patient-related documentation is restricted." I nodded. "I'm not asking for medical notes. I'm asking if someone is making public claims about who visited and who didn't. Is there any way the facility can confirm anything, even generally?" Karen studied me for a moment like she was deciding what kind of man I was. Then she said, "If there's defamation or a legal concern, you'd need to speak with our administrative office. Sometimes families request documentation for disputes. Usually it's about property or wills, but sometimes it's about narratives." Narratives. She said it like she'd seen families tear each other apart over them. I swallowed. "Okay, who would I contact?" She gave me a card. "Director of Operations. Her email is here." I took it, thanked her, stood up, and just as I was leaving, Karen added something in a softer voice. "I don't know what people are saying," she said, "but I know you were present. It would have been easy for me to break down right there, in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by pamphlets about grief. Instead, I just nodded once, because I didn't trust my voice. On the drive home, I kept thinking about what she'd said. Sign-in process. Reminded after hours. Tracking. It wasn't a smoking gun. Not yet. But it was a door. And if that door opened, it wouldn't just clear my name. It would expose something else. How much of my family's devotion existed only in stories they told other people. That evening, I drafted an email to the Director of Operations. I wrote it 3 times before I sent it because I wanted it calm, professional, unemotional. I explained that false statements were being spread about my alleged lack of visitation, and I wanted to understand what documentation existed regarding visitor logs and what the process would be to request relevant information. I didn't accuse anyone by name. I didn't demand. I asked. Then I hit send and felt my stomach tighten as if I'd just stepped onto thin ice. While I waited for a response, my family kept pushing. Denise called me 2 days later, and her voice was sweet, too sweet. "I heard you've been asking questions about hospice," she said. The way she said it made it sound like I'd been caught snooping. "I went to ask about policies," I replied. "Why?" she asked, and I could already hear the trap being set. "Are you trying to make yourself feel better?" "I'm trying to stop people from calling me a monster," I said. A small pause, then Denise sighed dramatically. "Ethan, you know I never wanted this to be a thing. But people noticed. They noticed who was there and who wasn't." My hands tightened on the phone. "People noticed what you told them." "That's not fair," she snapped, sweetness gone. "I was there every day. Every day, Ethan." I watched her fade. I held her hand. "And you came when it was convenient." There it was again. Convenient. Like my job and my life were selfish hobbies. "Did you tell people Nana died alone?" I asked. Denise didn't answer directly. She never did when the truth wasn't useful. "I told people what it felt like," she said. "It felt like I was alone." That was the kind of sentence that could justify anything. Feelings as facts. "I'm done with this," I said, voice low. Denise's tone changed again. Sharper, more threatening. "Don't do something you'll regret. Mom doesn't need more stress. We all lost her. We all lost her," I repeated. "But only one of us is losing a reputation on purpose." She went quiet for a moment, then said, "You always think you're better than us." And then she hung up. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I was afraid of Denise, but because I was finally seeing the pattern clearly. They weren't just defending themselves. They were protecting a persona they'd built for years. Denise, the devoted daughter. Elaine, the grieving saint. Rick, the harmless uncle. And for that persona to stay intact, somebody had to be the coward. Somebody had to be the one who didn't show. It was easier if that somebody was me. The quiet one. The one who didn't perform. The one who didn't post pictures. I went back to my notes and started adding another column. Not my visits, their claims. Every time someone said Denise was there every day. Every time my mom said you weren't present. Every time someone hinted Nana was heartbroken. I wasn't building a case in court. I was building a map, because if you map lies, you eventually see where the truth is being avoided. A few days later, I received a short email back from the hospice director of operations. It was polite, corporate, carefully worded. Thank you for reaching out. Due to privacy policies, we are unable to disclose patient-specific information without proper authorization. If you believe you require documentation for legal purposes, please submit a written request along with proof of authority to receive such information. Proof of authority. In other words, next of kin, executor, legal representative, which meant my mom, which meant Denise had positioned herself perfectly. And for a moment, I felt the familiar helplessness of being the reasonable person in a family that weaponized procedure. They would hide behind policy the way they hid behind grief. Then my phone buzzed, a text from my cousin Laura, the one who had asked what happened. I just had lunch with Aunt Denise. She said Nana asked for you and you never came. Is that true? I stared at the words. Nana asked for you. That was new. That wasn't just he wasn't around. That was a direct emotional accusation. A specific cruelty designed to make me look not just absent but rejecting. And it was so clearly calculated that my hands started shaking. Because Nana would never have wanted that used as a weapon. I typed back, "No, it's not true. I was there often. I'm handling it." Then I sat there in my living room, phone in hand, and realized I was at a turning point. If I did nothing, the story would harden into truth. It would become the version everyone remembered, the version my family preferred. If I fought them in the usual way, arguments, yelling, pleading, I'd lose, because they were better at emotions as evidence than I'd ever be. So the only way forward was the one thing they didn't expect from me. I needed verification that didn't rely on my voice. Something written, something logged, something boring and undeniable. And I already knew it existed. The hospice tracked visitors, maybe imperfectly, maybe not for every minute, but enough. Enough to show patterns, enough to show who kept showing up, and who mostly showed up in stories told later. The only question left was how to get it without my mother's permission. And that was when I remembered something Nana used to say, usually when she caught me overthinking as a teenager. "Ethan," she'd tell me, tapping the side of her coffee mug, "the truth is patient, but it's not shy. If you go looking, it will meet you halfway." So I went looking for the halfway point, and the next step wasn't confronting Denise. It was finding the one person in that building who had no reason to lie for my family, someone who had watched people come and go day after day, and who had written it down because that was her job. A nurse, a quiet professional, a witness who didn't even realize she was holding the thing that could end my family's little theater for good. The next morning I took a half day off work and drove to Nana's house. It felt wrong to call it her house now. It had already started becoming a family object, something to divide, something to argue over, something to stand in and tell stories about. But to me it was still Nana's space. The place where she kept her tea tins lined up like soldiers, where the kitchen clock ran 2 minutes fast because she liked being ahead of the world. My mom had the key. Denise had the key. Rick had the key. Everybody had the key, which should tell you exactly how safe anything in that house really was. I let myself in and stood in the entryway for a moment, listening to the silence. The air smelled faintly like old wood and lemon cleaner. Nana had always kept the place tidy, but now there was a layer of stillness over everything, like the house was holding its breath. I wasn't there to pick through her things. I wasn't there to take anything. I was there because Nana was organized. Nana documented. Nana labeled. If a form existed that could help me, she would have kept a copy. I went straight to the small desk in the living room, the one she used to pay bills at, always with a pen clipped to a notepad and a little tray where she kept stamps, envelopes, and those tiny address labels old people love. The drawers were already disturbed, not ransacked but searched. Papers weren't in their exact stacks. A few folders looked shifted. Someone had been there with an agenda. That should have made me furious. Instead, it made me focused. I started opening cabinets and checking file boxes. Nana had a system: medical, insurance, legal, church, taxes. She wrote in neat block letters on manila folders, then dated the top corner when she updated them. It took me 20 minutes to find what I needed. A folder labeled hospice admission. My stomach tightened as I lifted it out. The folder was thicker than I expected. Inside were printed brochures, a facility handbook, medication summaries, and a small packet of forms with signatures. I sat at Nana's desk and slowly flipped through everything like I was handling something fragile even though it was just paper. And then I saw it, a form titled something like Authorization to Release Information with Nana's name at the top. Not medical details, just permission for staff to discuss her condition with named individuals. There were 3 names listed: Denise, my mom, and me. My full name, Ethan Sullivan. My phone number, my relationship, grandson. Nana's signature was at the bottom, dated the day she was admitted. For a long moment I couldn't move. I just stared at the paper, feeling something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was clenched so tight. Because this wasn't a receipt or a map ping. This was Nana's intent, written down. Nana wanted me included, which meant every time my mother said you weren't present, and every time Denise implied I chose not to be involved, they were not only lying about me, they were overriding Nana's own decision. I took a photo of the form, front and back, then another photo, then one more, because paranoia had officially become a survival skill. I didn't take the folder. I didn't want anyone accusing me of stealing documents. I just needed proof. On my way out, I noticed something else on the desk, an old spiral notebook with Nana's handwriting. I hesitated, then flipped it open. It was a simple log, phone calls, appointments, names of doctors, dates, not a diary. More like Nana's version of a spreadsheet, and mixed in with notes like Dr. Patel 2:30 and pick up refills. There were small entries that made my throat tighten. Ethan came after work, sat quietly, brought soup. Ethan called to check on pain meds. Ethan stayed late, read to me. I didn't read further. It felt too intimate, like overhearing a private prayer, but I didn't need more. Those few lines told me something that mattered. Nana saw me. Even if my family pretended not to. I left the house, got into my car and sat there for a full minute before I started the engine. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding like I'd just run upstairs. Because now I had something concrete, and now I also knew without a doubt that Denise and my mom had been perfectly comfortable rewriting Nana's final weeks if it served them. That realization changed the way I was willing to play this. I went home and immediately emailed the hospice director of operations again. This time, I attached the photo of the authorization form and wrote calmly, I located the signed authorization listing me as an approved individual for discussion of my grandmother's care. I understand privacy limitations, and I'm not requesting medical care notes. I'm requesting any non-medical visitation documentation maintained by the facility, for example, visitor sign-in logs, for the purpose of addressing ongoing false statements being circulated publicly. I stared at the email for 10 seconds, then hit send. I expected another corporate brush-off. What I didn't expect was a phone call 2 hours later. This is Melissa, a woman said, Director of Operations. Is this Ethan Sullivan? Yes, I said, standing up automatically like she could see me. I received your message, she said. Her tone was professional, but less scripted than the email. I reviewed the authorization you sent. It does list you. My throat went dry. Okay. However, she continued, that authorization permits staff to speak with you about the patient while she was alive. Since she's deceased, access to any patient-linked documentation typically goes to the personal representative of the estate. I felt the old frustration rise. So my mother, possibly, she said carefully, or whoever is legally appointed. I exhaled slowly. I don't have that. There was a pause. Then Melissa said, what I can do is this. I can schedule a meeting with you and our nurse manager present. We can discuss in general terms, visitation procedures and any concerns, but I cannot provide copies of documents without proper legal authority. My hope flickered, then steadied. Can I at least view anything, even if I can't take it? Melissa hesitated. Let me be very clear. I'm not promising access to patient records, but visitor sign-in logs are maintained for facility safety. They are not the same as medical charts. That said, they are still linked to specific patients by context. So we have to be cautious. Cautious was fine. Cautious was better than nothing. I understand, I said. I'm willing to meet, and I'm willing to have it documented that I'm not asking for medical information. All right, she said. I'll set something up for early next week. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since Nana died. Momentum. Not rage. Not revenge. Just the sense that reality was finally moving forward, even if slowly. Of course, reality never moves forward without someone trying to stop it. That weekend, Denise invited the family to go through Nana's things together like we were all on the same team. I didn't go. I told them I had work. That was true, but it was also a choice, because I knew what would happen if I stepped into that house with them. Denise would cry. My mom would sigh. Rick would joke, and then inevitably someone would say something pointed about hospice, and I wasn't ready to react without evidence in my hands. Instead, I called my cousin Laura, the one who had texted me, because she was the closest thing I had to a neutral observer in our family. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, "but I need to ask you something directly. What exactly did Denise tell you at lunch?" Laura hesitated, then sighed. "She said Nana kept asking for you, that you didn't come, that she—" Laura lowered her voice like it was scandalous, "that she died disappointed." My stomach twisted. Did she say that word, disappointed? Yes, Laura admitted. And Ethan, I didn't know what to say, because it sounded, I don't know. She said it like she was there when Nana said it. "That's the point," I said quietly. "It sounds like a first-hand truth. It's not." Laura went silent. I could hear background noise, dishes, maybe kids. "You were there?" she finally asked. I swallowed. "A lot. After work. I was there the night before she passed." Laura's voice softened. "Then why would Denise—" "Because Denise needs to be the person who did everything," I said, "and she needs me to be the person who didn't." "You're serious," Laura murmured. "I'm serious," I said, "and I'm going to prove it. I'm not asking you to pick sides, but I want you to keep your eyes open. Watch how the story changes depending on who's listening." Laura didn't answer right away. Then she said very quietly, "Okay, I will." After I hung up, I sat there thinking about how absurd it was that I had to build a case about visiting my own grandmother. Like love needed receipts, like grief required documentation, but my family had turned this into a public trial, and if they wanted evidence, I was going to give them evidence. Monday came, and I drove to the hospice meeting with my heart in my throat. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find. Deep down, I already knew the truth. I was afraid of what the truth would do, because once I had something written, something undeniable, there would be no going back to polite family dysfunction. There would be consequences. Lines drawn, relationships snapped. Still, I walked into the building, checked in at the front desk like I always did, and waited. Melissa met me in the lobby and led me to a small conference room. Nurse Karen was already there, seated with a folder in front of her. When she saw me, she nodded once, like she was confirming I'd actually followed through. Melissa began with corporate language, privacy, procedure, condolences. I listened, nodded, kept my hands folded to stop myself from fidgeting. Then I said, "People are publicly claiming I never visited my grandmother. They're saying I abandoned her, that she died alone. I need to know if there is documentation of visitation that can confirm who actually came." Karen glanced at Melissa, then back at me. "There is a sign-in log," she said plainly. My pulse jumped. "Where is it kept?" "At the front desk for after-hours visitors," Karen replied. "During the day, visitors still sign in sometimes. Staff encourage it." Melissa interjected. "We can't provide copies to you without legal authority." "I'm not asking for copies," I said, voice steady. "I'm asking to view with supervision the sign-in log entries relevant to my grandmother's stay." Melissa's eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't hostile. She was calculating risk. Karen said, "Melissa, the visitor logs are facility safety records. They're not clinical." Melissa nodded slowly, "But they still reflect who came to see which patient." Karen didn't argue that. She just said, "He has a legitimate concern." There was a long pause while Melissa weighed something internally. Then she stood up. "Wait here." She left the room. Karen looked at me and spoke in a lower voice. "You're not crazy," she said. "I didn't think I was," I replied, but my voice came out tighter than I wanted. Karen's expression stayed calm. "People do this. After someone passes, they rewrite the story. Sometimes they do it to ease guilt. Sometimes they do it because they like the praise. But they forget. We see who walks through the doors." My throat tightened. "So you remember my family?" Karen's eyes flicked away for a second, then back. "I remember you. I remember your grandmother relaxing when you were in the room. That's what I remember." Before I could respond, Melissa returned. Behind her, an administrative staff member carried a thick binder. My stomach dropped. Melissa said, "We are going to allow you to view the visitor log binder under supervision. You will not photograph it. You will not remove it. You will not copy it. You can take handwritten notes of dates and times pertaining to your own presence. We will also note for our internal records that you expressed concern about false statements being spread. My mouth went dry. Thank you. The staff member set the binder on the table with a dull thud. Karen opened it carefully, like she was opening something that could cut. The pages were filled with lines, names, dates, times, signatures. It looked so ordinary, like a classroom attendance sheet, and I realized, with a strange chill, that something this boring could blow up my family. Karen flipped to the section corresponding to Nana's admission date. She ran her finger down the first page. Then, before she could even turn it toward me, the conference room door opened hard. Denise walked in, not knocked, not asked, just walked in like she owned the air. Her eyes locked on the binder instantly, and the color drained from her face so fast it was almost comical, except nothing about it was funny. Melissa stood up, startled. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Denise's voice trembled with outrage that sounded rehearsed. "What is he doing? Why is he here? Why are you showing him anything?" I felt my body go still, because Denise hadn't asked a single question about Nana when Nana was alive that sounded that urgent. But a binder? A sign-in sheet? That apparently was worth storming a room for. Melissa said, "This is a private meeting." Denise cut her off. "I'm family. I'm the one who handled everything. You can't show him those records. He's trying to twist things. He feels guilty, and he's trying to rewrite history." Karen's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, please lower your voice." Denise pointed at me, eyes bright with fury. "He wasn't there. He wasn't there when she needed him. And now he's trying to—" I interrupted, voice low and steady. "Then you shouldn't be worried about a sign-in sheet." For half a second, the room froze. Denise's mouth opened, but no sound came out, like her brain had reached for a script and found a blank page. Karen slid the binder slightly closer to herself, protective. Melissa looked like she was one breath away from calling security. And Denise stared at that binder like it was a gun aimed at her. Because in that moment I knew something for sure. Whatever was on those pages, it wasn't going to match the story she'd been telling. Denise's face tightened like she was holding her breath on purpose. Melissa stepped closer to the door, blocking it without making a scene. "Ma'am, you can't just walk into a private meeting." Denise's eyes flicked to Karen, then back to me. "He's trying to get records. He's trying to make us look bad." I kept my voice calm. "No, I'm trying to stop you from making me look evil." Karen didn't raise her voice, but there was authority in it. "Denise, I remember you. You came in, you visited, but you don't get to control what other family members do, and you don't get to interrupt facility business." Denise scoffed. "Facility business? This is my mother, my family, and this is our facility," Melissa replied, crisp now. "If you don't leave, I will have you escorted out." Denise's nostrils flared. For a second I thought she might actually lunge for the binder. The way her gaze kept snapping back to those pages, it wasn't anger alone, it was panic. That was the moment I understood something important. Denise wasn't afraid of me talking. She was afraid of paper. Because paper doesn't care who cries harder. Denise forced a laugh that didn't match her eyes. "Fine, do your little meeting, but don't act surprised when this tears the family apart." Then she pointed at me again, like I was the one holding a match. "This is on you." I didn't blink. "No, Denise, the lies are on you." Karen opened the door. "Please leave." Denise walked out, but she didn't just leave the room. She made sure her footsteps were loud. She wanted everyone in the hall to know she was offended. When the door clicked shut, the conference room felt suddenly smaller. Melissa exhaled. "I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened." Karen looked at me, her expression steady. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied, because I didn't know how to explain what it feels like when someone you grew up with becomes a stranger in real time. Melissa sat back down and placed both hands on the binder like she was anchoring it. "We're going to continue, but I need to restate boundaries. No photos. No copying." "I understand," I said. "I'll take notes." Karen turned the binder toward me. There it was, line after line, neat columns, date, time in, time out, printed name, signature. The ordinary proof of human presence. Karen ran a finger along the top of the page. "This section is for the week your grandmother was admitted." My eyes scanned the first few lines, and immediately I saw my name, Ethan Sullivan. 6:18 p.m., 9:04 p.m., Ethan Sullivan. 6:31 p.m., 8:47 p.m. My throat tightened. I hadn't expected the validation to feel so physical, like pressure behind my eyes. Karen flipped the page. More entries. Some family names, some friends, some church members, and then spaced between them, over and over, my own. I started writing dates and times in my notebook, careful, precise. Melissa watched me like a compliance officer. Karen watched me like a witness. And in the back of my mind, I could still hear Denise's voice. He wasn't there. I kept turning pages, and the more I turned, the clearer the pattern became. Denise's name was there, yes, but not daily, not even close. Some weeks she came twice. Some weeks she didn't appear at all after hours. And that alone wouldn't prove absence. Maybe she visited during the day and didn't sign in. But it collided with the story she'd sold to everyone, that she was basically living there, that she was there every night, that she held Nana's hand through the worst hours. If you tell people you were there at night, you sign in at night. That was the whole point of the binder. Then I looked for my mom, Elaine Sullivan. There were a few entries, not many. And Rick, I flipped through 3 more pages before I found him. Richard Sullivan, 1 entry, a Saturday afternoon, in at 1:12 p.m., out at 1:38 p.m., 26 minutes. That was it. I stared at that line until the numbers blurred. Because Rick wasn't the one under attack. I was. And Denise had used my name as a shield to keep eyes off her brother. I kept writing, my hand moving faster now. My name appeared constantly. Weekday evenings, weekends, late visits. And then something else caught my eye. A cluster of entries with Denise's name, in handwriting that looked oddly similar across multiple lines. Too similar. I'd never been a handwriting expert, but when you work with data long enough, you learn what too consistent looks like. Real patterns have variation. Lies tend to be tidy. I leaned closer. One line read Denise Harper, her married name, signed in at 8:55 p.m. Another line, 2 days later, Denise Harper, same swoop, same pressure, signed in at 8:58 p.m. And then again, another night, same signature rhythm, almost like someone had practiced signing that name the same way. I looked up at Karen. Do visitors ever sign in for someone else? Karen's jaw tightened. They aren't supposed to. Does it happen? I asked. Melissa cut in quickly. We can't speculate. Karen didn't look at Melissa. It happens, she said simply. Some people try to sign for multiple relatives so it looks like everyone was there. Staff are trained to watch for it. A chill ran through me. And did staff watch for it with Nana? Karen's eyes met mine. We remind people. We don't police grief like a crime. But, yes, we notice. Melissa's voice stayed careful. Ethan, we're allowing you to view this. We're not making an interpretation statement. I nodded, but my mind was racing. Because now I wasn't just looking at who came. I was looking at who wanted to be seen coming. And the two weren't always the same. Karen flipped another page, and I saw an entry that made my stomach drop. Someone had signed Elaine Sullivan, on a night I knew my mother was out of town because she'd called me from her sister-in-law's house complaining about the drive and the weather. My mother's name, on the sheet, on a night she wasn't there. I swallowed hard. Can I check the date? Karen pointed. I read it again. It matched my memory. My mouth went dry. That wasn't her. Melissa's expression tightened. Ethan, I'm not accusing, I said, forcing my voice level. I'm stating a fact. My mother was not there that night. Karen didn't look surprised. She looked resigned, like she'd seen this movie before. Keep going, Karen said quietly. So I did. And as I turned the pages, it wasn't just Denise's narrative collapsing. It was the whole family myth. The myth that they were the devoted ones and I was the absence. The sign-in sheets told a different story, one made of ink and timestamps and signatures that couldn't be guilt-tripped into changing. After about 20 minutes, Melissa closed the binder gently. That's enough for today. My heart jumped. I'm not finished. I understand, she said, but we need to keep this controlled. You've taken notes. If there's a formal need for documentation, you can pursue legal authority. I wanted to argue, but Karen gave me a look that said, don't blow your access. So I nodded. Okay. Melissa stood. We will also document internally that you raised concerns about false statements and that a family member interrupted the meeting. Good, I said, because for once I wanted my family's behavior recorded somewhere they couldn't rewrite it. Karen walked me back toward the lobby. As we passed the front desk, I saw the receptionist glance up. She'd probably heard Denise's voice earlier. Karen stopped near the exit and lowered her voice. I can't give you copies, she said, but I'm going to tell you something as a nurse and as a human being. I waited. We keep those sheets for safety, she continued. But we also keep them because families argue after. They always do. And when they do, they usually try to argue with feelings. She tapped the side of her head. But this is memory you can hold. My throat tightened. So you've seen this before? Karen nodded once, enough that it stopped surprising me. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in my chest since Denise walked into that room. Did my grandmother ever say she was disappointed in me? Karen's face softened. Real softness, not the performative kind. No, she said. She never said that. I felt something in me loosen so hard it almost hurt. Karen added, she asked about you. She liked when you came, and when you weren't there she assumed you were working. She wasn't angry. She was practical, like she knew who you were. I had to look away for a second because my eyes were stinging. Thank you. Karen didn't touch me, didn't hug me. She just nodded again, like that was enough. I walked out of the hospice with my notebook in my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning in other people's opinions. I had something solid. I also had a new fear, because I knew Denise wasn't going to let this go quietly. My phone rang before I even reached my car. Mom, I stared at the screen for a second, then answered. Hi, Elaine didn't waste time. What are you doing? Her voice was tight with anger and embarrassment, the exact tone she used when she thought someone was making the family look bad in public. I'm correcting lies, I said. You went to hospice? She demanded. Denise said you're trying to get records. Are you out of your mind? I kept my voice low. Mom, people are calling me heartless. You didn't stop it. Denise made it worse. She's grieving, Mom snapped. And you're stirring things up. I'm not stirring anything, I said. I'm opening a window. You're the one who's been letting smoke fill the house. There was a stunned pause, like she didn't expect me to talk back in metaphors. Then she hissed. You always do this. You always make it about you. I nearly laughed. About me? Mom, you let people believe I abandoned Nana. You weren't there like Denise was, she said again, stubbornly clinging to the script. I was there, I replied, and there are sign-in sheets that prove it. Silence. Real silence this time. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Just the sound of my mother realizing there might be a record that doesn't care about her version. Then she said, much quieter, what did you see? I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I knew how she operated. If I told her, she'd immediately shift to damage control, call Denise, decide what story to tell next, figure out how to soften it before anyone else heard. So I said, enough. Mom's voice sharpened again. Ethan, I am your mother, and Nana was my grandmother. I said, stop acting like I'm the enemy, because I refuse to be the scapegoat. Her breathing sounded harsh through the phone. You are going to tear this family apart. I looked at the hospice building behind my windshield, then at my notebook on the passenger seat. No, I said quietly. The lies already did that. I'm just finally looking at the proof. Mom hung up. I sat there for a moment, phone still in my hand, and I knew what was coming next. Denise would start calling people, preemptively. She'd frame me as obsessed, vindictive, unstable. She'd tell them I was harassing hospice staff. She'd do anything to discredit the idea that documentation existed. Because once people started asking, is there a record? Her entire performance would collapse. I drove home, and instead of pacing or spiraling, I did what Nana would have wanted. I organized. I typed my notes into a clean timeline. Date, time in, time out, my visits. Then I added a second section. Family visits visible in the log. I didn't even need to exaggerate. The numbers spoke for themselves. And then I did something I never thought I'd do with my own family. I called an attorney. Not to sue anyone. Not yet. Just to ask a simple question. How do I legally request visitor sign-in documentation from a hospice facility if I'm being defamed? The attorney listened, asked a few clarifying questions, then said, if your name is being harmed by false statements, you may be able to request records through a formal demand or subpoena depending on the situation. But first, we'd want to confirm who the personal representative is. Also, we'd want to preserve evidence of the statements being made. Preserve evidence. I felt a grim little satisfaction. My family loved stories. Now we were talking about evidence. That night, I started taking screenshots. Denise's posts, comments from relatives, messages people had sent me. Anything that implied I'd abandoned Nana. I wasn't proud of it. It felt ugly. But uglier was letting them bury me under a lie and calling it grief. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. From Rick. I almost didn't listen. Rick had a gift for being useless at the exact moments he could have been helpful. But I pressed play. "Hey, Ethan," Rick's voice said, forced casual. Your mom told me you're making a big thing about hospice. Look, man, just be careful. Denise is really upset. People are talking. You don't want to be the guy who, attacks family after mom dies. After mom dies. He meant Nana, and he couldn't even say her name. The voicemail continued. We all did what we could. Don't make this ugly. Call me back. I stared at the screen, feeling a cold clarity settle in. Rick wasn't warning me for my sake. He was warning me because for the first time he realized the spotlight might swing toward him too. And that meant the next phase wasn't going to be private emails and quiet meetings. The next phase would be public. Because Denise had already made it public when she tried to destroy me in our community. Now, whether I liked it or not, the truth would have to show up in the same place the lie lived out in the open, where everyone could see who actually walked through the hospice doors and who only walked through people's conversations. And I knew exactly where my family would be gathered next. A family remembrance dinner Denise had planned for the following weekend. Friends, church members, extended relatives. A stage, an audience, a perfect place for her to perform devotion again. Unless someone brought the receipts. The remembrance dinner was Denise's idea. She framed it like a healing thing, one last gathering to celebrate Nana's life. But I knew Denise. Denise didn't host events for healing. She hosted events for control. She rented the back room of a nice local restaurant, the kind with dim lighting and linen napkins. She invited half the church circle, a bunch of extended relatives, and even a few neighbors who hadn't seen Nana in years. People who loved Nana, but also people who loved a story. And Denise had been feeding them one. All week I debated whether I should even go. Part of me wanted to skip it and protect my peace. Let Denise have her performance and let the rumors die out eventually. But then I remembered the messages. The looks. The quiet judgment. In a community like ours, lies don't die out. They fossilize. So 2 days before the dinner, I met my mother one more time. This time at her house. I didn't ask. I told her I was coming. When she opened the door, she looked tired, older than she had a month ago. Not just from grief, from the constant effort of keeping her preferred story intact. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't ask how I was. She just said, "What do you want?" "I want this to stop," I replied. Mom's eyes flicked away. "Then stop pushing." I took a slow breath. "I'm not pushing. I'm responding. You and Denise made me into a villain." Mom's lips pressed together. "Denise is devastated, and I'm being publicly called heartless," I said. "You don't get to demand I stay quiet to protect her feelings while she destroys my name." That landed. Maybe not as truth. My mother had a complicated relationship with truth, but as something she couldn't ignore. She sighed and walked into the living room. I followed. "I talked to Hospice," I said. "They have visitor sign-in sheets." Her shoulders tensed. "Denise told me. I'm asking you to do one thing," I continued. "Sign the authorization request so the facility can release a visitor log summary to the family. Not medical information, just the sign-in record. You're next of kin. You can request it." Mom stared at me like I'd asked her to confess to a crime. "Why would I do that?" she said. "Because you keep saying you're telling the truth," I replied. "So let's use something that doesn't have opinions. Let's use something that's written down." Mom's voice got quiet. "You're trying to humiliate Denise." "I'm trying to stop being humiliated," I said. "There's a difference." She paced once, hands clasped tightly. Then she said, "And what if it doesn't show what you think it shows?" I held her gaze. "Then I'll accept it. If the record shows I wasn't there, I'll live with that." Mom's eyes narrowed. "And if it shows you were there, then you correct the story," I said. "Publicly." Her face tightened at that word. Publicly. The thing she feared most. She swallowed. "Denise is going to be furious." I nodded. "She already is. She walked into a private meeting at Hospice like she owned the place. That's not grief, Mom. That's fear." My mother didn't answer right away. She sat down slowly on the couch like her legs had lost patience with her pride. Finally, she said, "Bring the forms." I had them ready, printed from the Hospice email, filled in except for her signature. I'd learned to plan ahead where my family was involved. Mom signed, and her hand shook slightly. When she finished, she put the pen down and stared at her name like it meant something new. "This better not make us look bad," she muttered. I kept my voice steady. "If it makes anyone look bad, it won't be the paper doing it." 2 days later, the Hospice sent a formal, typed summary on letterhead, along with photocopies of relevant sign-in pages for Nana's stay, redacted where needed, but clear enough to show names, dates, and times. I read it alone at my kitchen table. The summary was calm, clinical, almost. It stated plainly that visitor logs reflected repeated evening visits by me throughout Nana's hospice stay. It stated that other family visits were present but less frequent than what had been represented publicly. It didn't accuse anyone of lying. It didn't need to. Then I looked at the pages. My name over and over. Denise's scattered. My mother's sparse and yes, appearing on nights she couldn't have been there. Rick's single 26-minute cameo. I felt sick for a minute, not because I was surprised, but because the truth was uglier in print. Not just they exaggerated. They manufactured a moral narrative and used my grandmother's dying days as the prop. I didn't sleep much the night before the dinner. Not from fear of confrontation. I can handle confrontation. From the weight of what it meant. Because once I said it out loud in a room full of people, I couldn't put it back. The next evening, I walked into that restaurant's back room and felt every conversation dip for half a second. That told me everything. People already had a version of me in their minds. The villain who abandoned Nana. The quiet, selfish grandson. Denise stood near the front with a stack of printed programs and a photo collage board like this was a fundraiser. She wore black, of course, and a necklace Nana had given her years ago, an item I recognized immediately, which meant Denise had already begun claiming symbols. When she saw me, her smile looked like it hurt. "Ethan," she said loudly enough for people nearby to hear. "You came." I nodded. "I did." She leaned closer, voice low now. "Whatever you're planning, don't." I met her eyes. "Then you shouldn't have planned what you planned." Her smile vanished. "You're unbelievable. Save it," I said quietly, and walked past her. I sat toward the middle of the room. Not hidden, not front row. My notebook and the hospice envelope were in my jacket pocket like a weight. Dinner started. People talked. Stories about Nana floated around. Real stories, mostly. Her stubbornness, her generosity, her habit of putting too much pepper in everything. For a brief moment, I almost wished the night could stay like that. Like Nana could be remembered without someone trying to turn it into a scoreboard. But Denise couldn't help herself. After dessert, she stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Phones subtly angled. Denise's voice softened into that practiced tone, half grief, half inspiration. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," she began. "These past weeks have been the hardest of my life. Sitting with Mom every day in hospice, holding her hand, watching her fade, I felt the room tighten. People nodded sympathetically. Denise continued, eyes shining. "I just keep thinking, when it comes down to it, we're judged by what we do when no one is watching, when it's inconvenient, when it's painful." She paused, letting that sink in like a sermon. "And I'll be honest," she added, voice trembling at the perfect moment. Some people weren't there." The room went quiet in that way that isn't respectful. It's hungry. I felt the familiar heat of humiliation try to rise in my throat, but I didn't let it. I stayed still. Denise looked directly at my table, not even subtle. "But Nana still loved everyone," she said, magnanimous now, "even those who left her alone." That was it. Not a hint, not a suggestion, a public execution. I stood up. A few people gasped softly, like they'd been waiting for this scene. Denise's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed, as if she was bracing to win. "Denise," I said, and my voice came out calm, clear. "I'm going to stop you there." She lifted her chin. "Excuse me?" "I didn't leave Nana alone," I said, "and you know that." A murmur rolled through the room. Denise scoffed. "Oh, so now you want to rewrite?" "No," I interrupted, still controlled. "I'm done letting you rewrite. So I brought something that isn't my memory or your feelings." I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket, walked to the front, and placed it on the table beside Denise like I was setting down a file in a meeting. Her eyes locked onto it. I opened it and pulled out the hospice letterhead summary and the photocopied visitor sign-in sheets. "This," I said, turning slightly so the closest tables could see the header, "is from the hospice facility. It's a record of who visited Nana during her stay." The visitor sign-in sheets. Denise's mouth opened, then closed. I looked at the room. For weeks, people have been told I abandoned Nana, that I didn't show up, that she asked for me, and I never came. My voice tightened just slightly on that line, and I hated that it did, but I pushed through. "That is false," I continued. And instead of arguing, I asked for documentation. I held up the first page, keeping it visible. "My name is here," I said, over and over. Weeknights, weekends, late visits. I was there. Then I lowered the page and looked at my mother, seated near the front. She wouldn't meet my eyes. And the people telling you I wasn't there, I said, weren't there nearly as much as they claimed. Denise finally found her voice. This is disgusting. You're using paperwork to attack grieving family. I didn't raise my voice. You used Nana's death to attack me. Denise turned to the room, palms open, playing victim. He's doing this for attention. I flipped to a page and pointed. Careful, not theatrical. Denise, you said you were there every day. The log doesn't show that. Her face went red. People don't always sign in. Agreed, I said. So why did you tell everyone you were there at night? Why did you tell people you were the only one sitting with her in the hardest hours? Denise's eyes darted. Her voice rose. Because I was. I turned one of the pages toward my mother. Then explain this. Why is Mom's name signed in on nights she wasn't there? A stunned silence fell. My mother's head snapped up. Ethan, I'm not accusing you, I said to her, still calm. I'm asking you, because you weren't there on those nights. I know you weren't. Everyone's eyes went to my mother. She looked trapped, like a curtain had been pulled back and she hadn't been ready. Denise stepped toward me, voice sharp. Stop dragging Mom into this. I didn't flinch, then stop using Mom as a prop. Rick shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Someone in the back whispered, what does it say about Rick? I didn't even need to answer. The room was doing the math on its own. Denise tried one more move. Tears. Her voice cracked. Fine. Maybe I didn't sign in every time. Maybe I forgot. But I was there. I was there in my heart. That line might have worked on a smaller lie. It didn't work against ink. I looked at her and for the first time I let the edge show in my voice. Not anger, just finality. Denise, I said, you didn't just exaggerate. You told people Nana died alone because of me. You told them she was disappointed in me. You tried to turn me into something ugly so you could look like something holy. Denise shook her head violently, but her eyes were wet with something that wasn't grief. My mother stood up abruptly, chair scraping. Enough. Everyone, please. This is exactly what it is, I said softly, turning to my mother. You let it happen. My mom's face crumpled for a second, and I saw something real. Shame, maybe. Fear of judgment. Fear of the truth being louder than the story. She whispered, almost inaudible. I didn't think it would go this far. And there it was. Not denial. Not you're wrong. Just, I didn't think we'd get caught. A woman near the front, one of the church ladies who'd messaged me, looked down at her hands. Another man cleared his throat and stared at his plate like it suddenly mattered. People shifted away from Denise without even meaning to. Social gravity changing direction. Denise realized it too. She stood frozen, scanning faces, and for the first time all night she looked small. Not because she'd lost Nana, but because she'd lost the stage. I gathered the papers back into the envelope. I wasn't there to hand out copies like party favors. I wasn't there to keep humiliating them. I was there to end the lie. I looked around the room and said, I'm not asking anyone to choose sides. I'm asking you to stop repeating a story that isn't true. Then, because Nana deserved at least one moment that wasn't about my family's dysfunction, I added, if you want to honor Nana, honor who she actually was. She valued quiet loyalty. She valued doing the right thing when nobody clapped. I turned to Denise one last time. And if you ever use her death to smear me again, I won't meet you at a restaurant. I'll meet you with lawyers. Denise flinched like the word lawyers was poison. I walked out. I didn't slam a door. I didn't shout. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt done. Over the next few days, the rumor didn't just stop. It reversed. People who had been distant suddenly became polite again. Some apologized. Some didn't. But their tone changed. And in a community like ours, tone is a confession. My cousin Laura called me and said, I'm sorry. I should have questioned it sooner. It's okay, I told her, because she wasn't the one who wrote the lie. Rick texted once. We didn't have to do it like that. I didn't reply. My mother called a week later and cried. Real crying, not performance. She said she'd been ashamed. She said she'd been scared of what people would think. She said she didn't know how Denise had gotten so extreme. I listened, and then I said the one thing I needed to say. Mom, you don't get to be devastated, and also be dishonest. Pick one. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, you're right. Denise never apologized. Not once. She sent me a long message about how I had betrayed the family, how I had weaponized paperwork, how Nana would have hated conflict. I read it once and deleted it. Because Nana didn't hate truth. Nana hated theater. And that's what Denise had been doing. Acting. The final lesson, the one that still sits with me, isn't just that documentation matters. It's that love doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like showing up after work when you're exhausted. Sometimes it looks like sitting in silence so someone doesn't die alone. Sometimes it looks like letting people believe you're the bad guy until you realize the lie is going to live longer than the person you loved. I didn't expose my family because I wanted revenge. I did it because my grandmother's last days deserved honesty, and my life deserved boundaries. If someone ever tries to destroy your name with a story, don't fight the story with a louder story. Find the record. Find the witness. Find the truth that doesn't care who cries the hardest. Because the truth is patient, but it isn't shy.